So a little bit about how I came up with the idea of making a guitar. I do not play a guitar, but a friend of mine let me take this mask off. A friend of mine asked me if I had seen what David Day had been doing. David Day is another kid that I grew up with, and I hadn't heard about David Day for many, many years. And David Day had been making cigar box guitars. Well, at the time, I didn't know that that's kind of an art form. That's a lot of people make cigar box guitars. But I got thinking about what I might have that David could help me make into a guitar, like a couple bowls that you would put together, and with the neck coming out. And the more I thought about that, it occurred to me that maybe I could make a guitar shape on okay. Kathy, are we okay now with sound?
Yeah.
Okay, so this was the idea that I thought I had to pursue, and if I made a vessel with this kind of a shape, pear shape or whatever you might want to call it, I could cut off a slab, and this would be the guitar shape. So I had to start to figure all that out. My goal was to make a piece of art. A guitar is a piece of art. And secondly, I was in hopes that it would sound good, at least decent. Obviously, it wasn't going to compete with high-end guitars, but I wanted it to sound good. And I think I've done that. A friend of mine lives just down the road, Stephen Adams, plays guitar, and he's a good guitar player. And I asked him to film a little clip playing one of my guitars. So Kathy will get that going for you right now. Okay, so that's the first guitar I've made. I've made two, and a third one is in pieces, and that will allow me to show you some of the construction and how I went about the various elements of a guitar. Most of which are in fact turned on the lathe. It's not just that soundboard. The front of the guitar is called the soundboard, but a number of things, and we will get into that. Before we get into that, I'd like to do just a little bit of a shop tour, and then we will go across the garage to a finishing room that I have, and that's where I finish bowls and have some on display over there. And so I'll do a little bit of showing off, and then we'll get into the guitar making. So Kathy will follow me around the shop, and like most shops, obviously a chop saw, and going down this way, there's an edge sander, which is used a lot. If you're a segmented turner, it's used a lot. You make your segments the best you can, and then you put it together dry, and you find out that there's a little gap, so you come and you tweak up one of the segments, and then back to the bench and back and forth until you get it pretty good. So that comes in handy. Obviously, a bandsaw is here. This is my lathe. I have a 22-inch Grizzly, 3-horse motor, 3-phase, and it has a converter, so you can just plug it into a regular 220 outlet. And I like it's a good lathe. And this is something I made because I have some balance issues. I have old injury, spinal cord injury, and so my balance is not great. So I should not be, I have to hold myself, I should not be turning without some support. So I can lean on this and now simply turn away like anybody. So this is one of the little pieces. I think it was the first or second piece on that little list of 4 items. I've got a little bit of a YouTube video. If anyone has or knows of someone who has some balance issues, check out that video. And it's been wonderful for me. I used to turn sitting on a stool, and that's not very safe or efficient. So this has been wonderful. So then, as we continue around the shop, this is a drum sander. Again, for segmenting, it comes in very handy. I have a joiner, a planer, and then coming around the center of the room is the table saw with a little bit of clutter in it at the moment. So that's the shop where I was talking from before, and where I go back to is the workbench. And right behind Kathy here are the 2 guitars on the floor that we'll be talking about shortly. And we'll skip across the garage.
Just a reminder, folks, while Ted's moving across the garage, if you have a question, I've muted everybody but Ted. Accidentally Ted for a minute there. But if you have a question, remember, push your space bar, and then that'll push and hold the space bar. That'll unmute your microphone so you can ask your question.
So this is my finished room, and this is a slow turner. It turns at 17 RPM. I can put a chuck on here with a bowl. This chuck will hold another bowl, and it turns at 17 RPM. So I can put polyurethane on or whatever finish, and it won't run and create drips. And a friend of mine in Florida is using epoxy for his finish now. So I'm going to try that. Again, with a slow turner, it can turn for, I have set it on a timer, it can turn for 6 or 8 hours until it's tacky enough so it won't run, and then it will shut off. So I'm going to try epoxy on that. So this is, I don't know if you want this on or off.
Oh, better on tonight.
Some of my bowls. This is probably my one. I don't do a lot of things more than once or twice, but this type of work I've done a fair amount of, and it's probably my favorite, my go-to. It's a bowl from a board, and I make the board out of a number of pieces of wood, and then 1.5 inches thick, always 1.5 inches, and then I can shape it because I don't want it to look like so many bowl from a board that are conical. I want to put some shape to it, and I try to get something like a catenary curve shape. So this is a snake that I did last year for some competition down in Florida, and I don't know if I want to take the time to do this, but I put a ball bearing in its mouth, and with any luck, the tail rattles because it's a rattlesnake, so it does its thing. And when I was down in Florida last year, I thought I'd do pretty well with this and maybe get a blue ribbon at the Florida State Fair. And my wife Kathy and I went to the fair, and we found that it had a red ribbon with it. And so I wondered what had won the blue ribbon. And I got looking around, and there's some good competition there. I got looking around, and it was this simple little bowl had won the blue ribbon. And it's one of those stave bowls. Came up with that system last fall, and apparently the judge liked this a lot better than somewhat better than the snake. So you never can tell when you're in competition. So that's, without going on and on, which I'm inclined to, that's my finish room. Anyone have any questions?
Yes, I have one here. Where would I find that video you were talking about, the balance problems?
Who is this? I've got it, and it was on that PowerPoint page, I believe. Ted, wasn't that the video you had highlighted on that PowerPoint page?
Yes.
I will send that out to the club.
Thank you, Bill.
Who made that request?
That's me, Chuck.
Who made that?
Me, Chuck Moss.
Chuck.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thanks, Bill.
I will send that out to the club. Ted.
Yes.
Ted, what's that red item down low on the shelf?
With the white rim.
A stack of solo cups. And this has a couple stories. I'll try to be quick. One is that when I was setting up for one of the events down in Florida, we set up our stuff, and then we have to get out. And I had left, and before the judge came in, the fair or the event management sent someone around to collect any debris left behind by those of us that had set up our stuff. And someone saw a stack of solo cups, and they threw it out, and it found its way into a dumpster. Someone had to climb in and find it and get it back on display. The other story about this is that up at the Florida State Fair, this is the year before last, I had the guitar in the maple guitar in the competition, and I thought that might do pretty well. And I went up, my wife Kathy and I went up to see how I had done. And again, I had a red ribbon. I got looking around to see what had won the blue ribbon, and it was this. So 3 days of work versus 3 months of work. And this one, and this, you can't see it from there, but this has a terrible finish on it. The guitar has a very decent finish. And that should have disqualified this at the get-go. But anyway, this won the blue ribbon, the guitar won the red ribbon. In both cases, the guitar won the People's Choice, and the snake won the People's Choice. So that's always very. It makes you feel good that the people liked it. The judge had different criteria. Any other questions?
That's cool.
Okay, we'll go back to the shop and talk about making a guitar. So when I figured out how to make the shape of a guitar, and again, this was the idea that I had, and I needed to figure out some dimensions, and that's when I got the book that I also highlighted that on the information that you've seen. This was the book, and it has a fold-out, full scale, and it gives me a lot of information about the specifics of the dimensions. So a standard guitar has this. This is called the lower bout of the soundboard. The lower bout, the waist, and the upper bout. And so it gives me the dimensions for the lower bout, the waist, and the upper bout. So with that, I had to decide the size of my vessel. And you want the vessel, in my case, I wanted the vessel to be as big as possible, because the bigger it is, the smaller the hump, if you will, of the smaller, the less this is going to stick up. So I wanted as big a vessel as I could. I have a 22-inch lathe. So I said when I get all done, get it turned, maybe 20-inch is what I was going to target. Maybe I could have done a little more, but 20-inch was my plan for the biggest part of my vessel. So this piece of plywood represents 20 inches. It is 20 inches. This represents the biggest part of my vessel. The lower bout is from side to side is 16 inches on a standard guitar, give or take 16 inches. So if this is my vessel, I'm going to cut it off at 16 inches. From here to here is 16 inches. This is going to be the cut line when I cut this off at a sawmill, is where I ended up taking it. I cut that off. This gives me the 16 inches of the lower bout. That being established, I now know that to get this is a 20-inch radius. So I want my upper bout to be 12 inches. So from the center point, I go out 16 inches with a compass, and that gives me a 12-inch upper bout. And then the waist is 10.5 inches. And so 10.5 inches here gives, I know that that's a 16-inch diameter I need on the vessel. For the upper bout, I need a 17-inch diameter. The lower bout is a 20-inch diameter. So again, I wanted this to be 10.5 inches. So this has, from the outside of the vessel at this point, needs to be 16. This needed to be 17. This needs to be 20. So with that established, I put some numbers on paper, and I established my points that I just mentioned. The 20 inches is here. The 17 inches is here. I made a point, and here I put a point on the paper of 16 inches for the waist. So with those 3 points established, I now start to just kind of sketch it. And I draw some curves, and then I look at it and I erase and I redraw it, and I keep doing that until I get some curves that were satisfactory, in my opinion. So that became the outline of the vessel. So then I had to start figuring out rings that would make that all happen. There are about 30, I think there are 30 rings here. Each one has 24 segments, because I wanted my vessel to have I wanted to end up with 3 different species of wood on for each soundboard. Butternut, maple, and cherry. Well, in retrospect, I should have had 3 woods that were about the same weight, because when I built the vessel and started turning it, the maple is, of course, quite a bit harder than the butternut, and so I had a wobble right from the beginning. I don't think I got over 450 RPMs when I turned that whole thing, but I got it done. And so those of you that are segmenters, and by the way, I've been on your website, I've seen your show and tells, and you have some segmented turners, and you have some very talented turners in total. Nice website too, Jared, I guess. So this is going to be my vessel. I have to figure out each of the rings, the segments that go in each ring, and to decide. Each board that I use is 3/4 of an inch. Some of them, in this case, is 1 3/4 wide. This is 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 2, and so forth. Different depending on how you're going to come across that segment. But here, segment 16, for example, I want the ring to be 18 inches in diameter. And so I look up on and I came to that conclusion because at this point, it needs to be 16 3/4 inches. That's the vessel. And then over here, it's 17.5, and it gets bigger as it come around. So I look up on a chart that you can get on the internet, and I know that each segment has to be 2.435 inches wide. And obviously, I can't dial it in to 2.435, but you come as close as you can, and you end up with a ring that's 18 inches plus or minus, and hopefully there's enough play so I can make it work. Otherwise, we end up with a little bit of a design change if it's not quite enough, but it all works out pretty well. So I have all that data for each ring. I start making the rings. This is going to be a joint because I'm going to turn this section as a hollow form, if you will. And this is another one. I got a plywood base at each end with a faceplate, and I start to put it together, add a few rings and turn inside and out, add a few more and turn. This upper part, the upper belt and the waist, I've got to do another treatment, if you will. I've got to do something else to that before the final turning. So I've got to make this sound hole. So I get this built up, and I don't turn this part totally. I get it round, but not, and maybe it's 3/4 of an inch thick, the walls. My goal is to get down to 1/4 to 5/16. That's what I ended up with. But in this area, I leave it kind of thick because I need to do something else. I take this off of the lathe and I bring it over to the drill press. And I need to drill those holes for the sound holes. This is the soundboard for the third guitar, and I need to drill this hole. I use a 4-inch hole saw, and I get it on the drill press, so it's as horizontal as I can make it. And I come down through with a hole saw and I drill a 4-inch hole. Then I need, you see there's an insert. I need to work on the insert. Obviously I drill the 4-inch hole, I rotate, drill again, rotate, drill. 3 holes. And I need an insert. So I made this segmented ring, and I made another one. There were 2 of them, glue it together, put a faceplate on it, and let me back up. I drilled the 4-inch hole, and now I want that hole to be beveled a little bit, so that when I put this in, this will be beveled and it will fit sort of like a Morris taper. So I made this out of a chunk of wood. I put I think this is called a hanging bolt. It's got a machine threads on one end and wood threads on the other, lag bolt kind of a thread. And with a nut on here, turn it in, and then I cut the threads off, and now this will go in my drill press. And so I bring this down. This is sandpaper on here, and I sand until that hole, the sides of that hole are beveled just a little bit, and then this gets beveled, faceplate on it, too thick. And I turn this and I keep testing it to see if that's going to fit. I turn it a little bit more, sand it until this fits nice and snug in the hole, the entire surface of that hole. And so then I can glue this in place. And then I put it back on the lathe and I keep turning it until this is the shape of this. Once that is done, and it's all sanded, cleaned up on the outside and on the inside, and now I use a 3-inch hole saw, and I do the same thing again. This time I don't use the reamer on this. I just use a hole saw, and then I clean this up with some sandpaper. So now I've got my my sound holes, and I've got the sound hole inserts, and now I can glue the 2 halves together, and bringing up the tailstock, and then I can clean that up on the lathe on the outside, and then it's ready to go to the, however I'm going to cut this off. I went to a sawmill, and a fellow I'd known before, used him before, and he sawed these off. And it wasn't without some, I made a little mistake at that point, but we don't need to get into that. I didn't cut it off quite as thick as I needed to. So this is a little smaller than I wanted, and I ended up building it out. It all worked out. If you're ever going to do this, put some packing tape around, because when that saw comes out, even if it's a more traditional bandsaw or a sawmill, when that saw blade comes out, it tends to tear some material out. So packing tape would have made a much cleaner cut.
Hey, Ted.
Yeah.
We have a question. We have a hand raised with a question from Stan Van Druft. And while I've got a breather, Stan is actually the gentleman responsible for our website. And he does do a great job. I wanted to give the credit where it's due.
Yes, nice job,
Stan, do you have a question?
When you were talking about the layout, you had the flat drawing that had your lower bout, and you wanted a certain dimension. Yeah. Since that, when you cut 3 of the guitars out of your vessel, So you weren't on the diameter of the vessel. So when you had those dimensions there of the lower bout being, I can't remember if you said 16 or 20 inches, that wasn't the actual diameter. Oh, okay. I didn't quite follow that part there, so that probably answered it.
This is the cut line of, let's say, the maple, and this is the cut line for a second soundboard, and then here's a cut line for the third.
Okay, so you've got the straight line, the cord there that goes across, that is the width of your lower bout and upper bout and waist.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you very much.
And is that on a band sawmill?
Yes. And in our club, there's a gentleman that has some old equipment, and he has, I've been in his shop, he has a huge old bandsaw that at one point was, I think, belt driven from, overhead belts or whatever, maybe water mill. And he probably could have done it in retrospect, but I took it to a sawmill with a horizontal bandsaw. I've got some notes here. One of the things that when you're turning a vessel like that, you need to keep checking. You need to keep checking your dimensions. And I didn't have a caliper that big, so I made one. A pretty simple process. And you set this where you want it, tighten the knobs, and you keep checking it until you get to that point. But that was very helpful. So now I've got the soundboard done, kind of done. There'll be a lot more work on it, but the soundboard is done. I need to do the back and the sides, and I wanted the back to be turned. I wanted to turn everything as many pieces as possible. So the back has a little bubble out here. Because I just wanted everything to be turned as much as possible, and this I wanted the segment concept to continue on the back, so I needed to make a big segmented flat piece, and so I set out to do that, and it's a number of steps. Does this show up here?
Yeah. So
So I glued, in this case, I glued 4 boards together. That one I just showed you was butternut, and they were 1.25 inches thick, 8.25 inches wide, and 25 inches long. 4 of them glued together. After the next day, after the glue is set up, I cut those going against the grain into 2 3/4 inch segments. They're going to represent 2 3/4 inches when it's all done. That's what they are. So I made all my cuts going across grain. Then I mixed those up. I mixed them all up because I wanted the grain to be mixed up. I didn't want 2 boards to get glued back the same as they were. I would turn them end to end, some of them, and just mix them all up. And then I glued them back together again. Then I cut them going with the grain the other way, every 3/4 inch. I think I actually made it a little proud of that. Maybe 13/16, and then I ran it through the drum sander to get them all back to 3/4 of an inch. And then I, again, mixed them all up, and I glued them back together again. But this time, I staggered the joints because segmented work, you stagger the joints so that you can see that they're offset a little bit. And to keep them from moving around, I used a pinner, and I pinned them out here because that's not going to end up being on the lathe outside of this circle. And so I used a pinner, and then of course after they're pinned, you glue up 2 or 3 of them, you can clamp them, and they're not going to slide around on you. So I glue these all back together. To start out, this was 33 inches, but now I've taken so much kerf out of there that now we're down to probably 22 inches, 23 inches. And now I cut a circle, a 21.5 inch circle. This has to go on the lathe. It's a 22-inch lathe. So a 21.5 inch circle. I screw that to a 21.5 inch piece of MDF, which has a piece of plywood on the back of it and a faceplate on that. So it's screwed to the MDF, but it's screwed outside of where I'm going to end up cutting my back. The piece that I want to save is in here. The screws are going to be outside. I recess those screws, so I'm not going to hit them with my tool on the lathe. I of course, true it up, flatten it out, and I turn the dip in there because this is the inside of the back of the guitar. And I've made this, and if it's spaced at about a 1/4 to 5/16, this is my template. And so when I carved out that dish, when this fits the dish, I'm done. That's what I want. And then I sand that, and that part is done. Now I remove the screws, and I take this whole rounded section and I flip it over and put it back on the MDF. But this time I put some glue around each of these screw holes and I screw it back on. The next day I take the screws out and the glue is now holding it in place. That glue is going to get cut off with this waste piece when I cut it off. So now I turn the little hump, and again, when I retain that arc there, I know that I'm done. And at this point, the sides need to be about a 1/4 to 5/16, and then that is done. I put it on the. Now I take it off the lathe. I put it on the bandsaw and I cut out my my design, my shape, and the glued parts get thrown away. And this, once it's cut off, is simply lifted off of the MDF. So that's how I did the back. And then the sides. The sides of the guitar are also segmented, and the idea is that this segment, this ring, if you will, comes around, and they should match up with the side, and that should match up with I'll call it a ring. It's a flat ring on the back, and that should go all the way around. In an ideal world, all those would meet perfectly. Well, they're not perfect, but they're pretty good. So that's that's the challenge, is to do that. So when I do the sides, I glue up, uh, I glue up a bunch of boards, an inch and 3/4. My goal is to have the sides be 1.5 inches. I glue up a bunch of boards, 1 3/4, and a whole stack of them to give me whatever it is, 25 or so inches of the back of the sides to fit the soundboard and the back. So I glue up a bunch of those, and then I cut out the shape. And to get on the inside with the bandsaw, I follow a glue line to get inside. I cut out the inside, lift it out, and then I can back out that same kerf that I used to get in there, and then I can simply squeeze that and glue that back together. And you can't tell that I went in there with the bandsaw. Now I can cut the outside. It's a lot of waste of wood just to get the ribs, the sides, but this whole piece that I cut out can be used for something else, a bowl or a bowl from a board. So it's not necessarily wasted. So that's how I did the sides. Any questions at this point? So the neck of the guitar, actually, when I did the other two guitars, I got two necks out of one process. This time I only need one more neck, so I used MDF over here, and this is maple, and I've got down the middle I've got black locust. 2 pieces of maple, and I need that for strength because the neck has a lot of pressure on it when those strings are tightened up, and you don't want that to move. So the black locust going the other way is helpful. This is called the head. The head will, after it's turned, I turn these dimensions. This varies. It tapers up. These dimensions come right out of that book that I bought, and then the head will end up having another piece added here, another piece added here, and this is all cut out on the bandsaw, and then a lot of sanding to get it to where I want it. After this is cut down here, the MDF is removed, then this is called the fretboard. This fretboard will get added to the neck. There are frets that get added here, and there's a fret saw, and so you make saw cuts, and the frets are spaced. They're not uniform. They vary as you go up or down, and so you make the fret saw cuts after this is on there and sanded and all that. And in a similar piece, this is lace wood. Another piece of lace wood will get added to the head, and that's there's a lot of work that goes into this, and I'm just giving you the really basics of that process. But and some of the, like the head can be shaped any number of ways. This is the method I use to go into the body of the guitar. This will get glued to the bottom of the back of the guitar. The soundboard will come across in here, and I will fabricate a little piece to glue to here so that the soundboard can sit on that piece and get glued to that piece. And this could be any shape, any mechanism that you come up with. Let me see. The bridge. The bridge is this piece here, and that's a little tricky because the bottom of this has to conform with this and with this. And so to make that, and these are called the bridge pins. We'll talk about that in a minute. But to make the bridge, excuse me. I made this plywood MDF, and I glued some pieces, hot glued some pieces all around the edge. And I turned this, and I made a line here at what I thought was, not 20 inches, because it's not quite at the biggest part of that, the lower bout, but 19 3/4, something like that, as I recall. And that's where I'm going to cut this to. So I want this future bridge to come across there, and then I'll turn it to that, and it's got a little arc coming in this way, and of course this way. And I needed 3 of these ultimately. I put on, I think, 6 of these potential bridges, knowing that it may take, once I take it off, it's tough to get it back on the same spot. So I would take one off and test it. Well, I got it pretty good the first time. As I recall, I did a little hand sanding, but they fit pretty nicely, which is, of course, what you want when you're going to glue it on there. So this is how I did the bridges. Once I get this turned, then this comes off, and I clean all this up, and I use my edge sander over there to make some sand in these ends and make it designed like a typical bridge. So that's the bridge. We talked about the fretboard, the head, the bridge pins. The bridge pins, again, I wanted to turn as much as possible. You can buy those, of course, but I turned 6 bridge pins, and I used a reamer, not this reamer, but the same idea. I bought a reamer, and I don't have it here, but I had the bridge glued on the soundboard. I drill a hole on the drill press. I drill a hole, and then I use the reamer to ream that hole out so that it has a little bit of, again, like a Morse taper, and that's going to hold it in that hole. And this would be a little a piece. When I'm turning this on the lathe, I would fit it in. I had one of them marked as my favorite, and when it fit good, I can't see any daylight there. I can't see daylight there. So then this pin is good to go. The pin goes in the hole. The function of the pin, the job of the pin is to hold the wire, the string, guitar string, from coming out of the hole, but it's the string has a little bead on the end of it, and so that and I want this to hold the string over to the side. So I used a saw blade from I can't think of the name of that saw up there. Yeah.
Hacksaw?
No, not a hacksaw. It's a little saw, a little saw blade. What's that called?
Coping saw.
Coping saw. Thank you. Thank you for coping with me.
Over there, yeah.
So coping saw, and I make a little kerf in that hole so that this string, when it's in there, is going to be in that kerf. It's not going to be in the hole. It's going to be in that kerf, and this pin holds it in that kerf. So now it can't come out. It's when I pull on it, I'm not pulling up on the pin because the pin is just holding it in the kerf, and so that's the function of the pins. So that's the turning of the bridge pins. So that's kind of the head gets shaped. Again, lots of options on how to make that. The machines, they're called machines that get that drill some holes. They go in, and that's what your strings wind up on. Pretty basic there. So let's talk for a minute about other options. That's how I made these two guitars. The third guitar, which I have in pieces here, is going to be constructed a little differently. It's going to look a little different, and it's going to be an electric guitar. So this is the body, if you will. This is the soundboard, which you've seen, and it's going to be an electric guitar. So an electric guitar, the bridge will be up here, the neck comes out of here, and there's a pickup, electronic pickup that goes right in here. Maybe there's one, I think there might be one that actually mounts to the inside, and the wires run inside, and there's a plug, if you will, back here, jack or whatever, that gets plugged into your amplifier and into your speakers. So that there will be a pickup here, the bridge goes here, and this is how it's kind of how it's going to look. I've got some other layers of material. I want the side to be 1.5 inches. So there's a line, you probably can't see it right about here. That's 1.5 inches all the way around. And so this will get sanded down to that line. And so it reveals other materials. And I'm not sure if I like it, but that's what it's going to be. And maybe I will like it when it's all done. But so that will all get ground away, sanded away, and the back of this is a little different. It's using some of the same idea that I had before. It's a little simpler. It's just 3 pieces of wood glued together. Cherry maple butternut. You just glue some strips, and then you cut them and you slide them over one piece and glue them back together. One block, if you will, 3/4 inch, and you glue it back together, the whole thing. And so this is the look, and it's a nice I like it. It's a nice look. The sides are done more like a traditional guitar. This is 1.5 inches, and it's laminated. I think there are 2 layers of maple that make up these sides, and I use a pattern, a form, and I put a couple of veneers on here. I use packing tape so the glue won't stick. I've got 3 of these different shapes that I'll clamp on there, and that holds that creates my shape. The center is open, so I can clamp like this, and when the glue dries, it holds that shape pretty well, as you know. So that's how I did the sides, and then I added, after I put the back on, and these pieces on the top, then I put on my final side pieces, and they're glued on the same way to create this is the walnut, and there's a knot here, and there's the other pieces I have. There's a knot. This knot continues, and it'll come around. This gets cut out where the neck goes, and this gets cut out where the neck goes, and then you can start to glue it all together, and the bridge is on at that point, and maybe the pickup will be on there. So that's there are probably lots of ways to do this. And if you're making a stringed instrument, there are probably, well, there are hundreds and maybe thousands of types of stringed instruments around the world and over history. They've been around a long time. And it doesn't have to be, a guitar is what, 25¼ inches or something very specific. The length of from the nut to the saddle. Those are this is the saddle, this is the nut, and there's a specific dimension there, 25 or 26 inches, something, and that makes it a guitar. The frets are spaced such that, when you get that sound, and if you push behind that fret, it's a different sound, and so that makes it a guitar. There are mandolins, dulcimers, banjos, violins, bass guitars, and just a whole lot more that are not as familiar to us. So whatever you might do for a stringed instrument, it doesn't have to be. I saw the requirements for your club. It just needs to create a tune, as I recall, and so it could be something little, and you just put some strings on there, and you make whatever sound it makes, and hopefully it allows you to have a few frets, but there's so many options, and it doesn't have to be like this. Do look at that if you're interested at all in making a stringed instrument. Do look at that article that I mentioned before, the 2016 issue of American Woodturner, because that'll just give you another angle on this whole process. Going through this process has taught me a lot. You learn a lot when you have to figure out how to do this or that, and if you can figure it out, it may shed light on some other options. And let me just I took those pieces back in the other room. I don't know. It's caused me, thank you, Kathy, offered to go and get, but it's caused me to come up with some other, I've got some oblong bowls that I've made. Oh, there's someone right there. No, never mind. It's not there. I made some oblong bowls. I made one segmented oblong bowl with a handle on it. I call it a basket bowl. And so there are. I've got another one that's kind of round, but then it comes out with another. Well, for example, you could take this right here and make this a bowl. You could put a flat spot here to set on. You could put a little pedestal here, and that could be a serving tray with potato chips and a dip. You know, you could shape it a little differently. So this was more narrow. This was more deep and smaller, perhaps. So this could be chipped and dipped. There's so many options that this caused me to think about. And so Kathy's coming back with I don't know how she picked these out of all of those, but this is the basket bowl, and this is the oblong bowl that's made different from this. This is kind of the guitar vessel method, but I shaped it such that it would have that little end on it just for a fun thing. This is a little different method, but it came out of doing this, and I like that, and I like this. Again, segmented. Anyway, that's my story. Do you have any questions?
Yes, when you have the top bandsawed, how do you make sure that it is flat?
I'm
How do
sorry.
you stabilize it? How do you stabilize it before you turn the bandsaw on? Because you've got three faces that you want to sand eventually, or saw rather,
Yeah.
eventually.
Oh, I mean, how did I when are you asking when I sawed this off, how did I stabilize it?
Yes.
Yeah, good question. I made a cradle for it. And so it sat in the cradle like this, and I had it marked where it needed to be cut. And then once that cut was made, I would rotate it, and again it would still sit in the cradle. I had, as I recall, the cradle allowed me to have a couple screws into here, which is plywood, and a couple screws into this end. And then I would cut it off and rotate it again, screw it again, and then I was done.
Ted, I've got a question going back to your electric guitar when you had it open. I've made a couple of mountain dulcimers years ago. It's been a long time. I haven't done it since. But how did you make, I may use the wrong term here, the internal gussets that I see saw kerfs in?
Yeah, I bought, those are called Kerf Boards, and I bought those. And I'm not sure I needed them, but because I had them, I used them. But I just bought that off the internet, the Kerf Board. And that's how traditional guitars have Kerf Board in them. And it gave me, I told you how I made the shape of this with that mold. And then when I had the shape established, the Kerf Board glued on there, that gave me quite a bit more glue surface to glue the back on in these pieces. So
sure.
So that's its function in it, I took advantage of it.
Yeah, obviously it'll give better glue surface area and therefore more strength. I was just kind of curious if you made that Kerf board, but you say you bought it. Okay.
I tried to make it, and it didn't work out very well.
Well, that's why I asked, because I have them on my mountain dulcimers, and it didn't go well, but it sufficed.
Yeah, I've done it before for kitchen counters or something else, but when you're talking about this fine of material, it just didn't work.
Thank you.
Do you play these yourself?
No, I don't. But if I did, I would play it like my friend Steve, Stephen Adams. No, I don't play, and if I did play, it wouldn't be very good. So, but no, I'm often asked that, and I didn't make it for that reason. I made it just because I got the idea of how I could make the shape on the lathe, and once I had the idea, I just had to keep going with it. And some of you know what I'm talking about. When you get an idea, you can't just forget it. It's so now that I've got 2 of them made and I've gotten some attention about the whole thing, making the 3rd one is going to be. I'm going to have to work at that, and then maybe next summer I'll put this 3rd one, finish it up. I need to do that.
You see a very large tonal difference between having the bow that you turned in there versus a guitar made in a straight sort of way.
I don't know. A flat top guitar has some framing inside, and the soundboard in the back and the sides are thinner. So I'm sure that they sound better. And this Steve Adams that was playing it said it's not as loud. The sound isn't as loud and clear, but you heard him play it. It sounds pretty good, and that was my goal. But I certainly didn't intend to compete with the commercially made guitars, and because those are pretty thin, and you get a lot of the sound from the vibration of the wood. Apparently, this 3rd one that I'm going to be building next summer, I hope, is going to have much better sound, and because it's going to be an electric guitar, and when you put that sound pickup on there, it doesn't matter. In fact, they make a lot of electric guitars where this body is solid. It's solid wood, and it has a sound hole for looks, I guess, but it has the pickup, and the pickup picks up the sound from the strings. It doesn't have to resonate through the body of the guitar. So this one will sound great because it will be an electric guitar. So this is thicker, and it's and I don't know what this does to the sound, but anyway, it's my first goal was to make a piece of art, and then secondly is to have it sound good, and I've achieved that. But people, a lot of people have guitar collections, and some of them don't pick up one of those pieces for years. They just have a nice collection, and they might play 2 or 3 of them. So maybe these will end up in a collection somewhere. I've numbered each of them, and if you look through the sound hole to the what ends up being you look through the sound hole of a guitar, of these guitars, you see this piece through the sound hole, and on the top of this, I've signed it and dated it, and I've numbered it, 1, 2, and this will be 3. So hopefully somebody will want this for their guitar collection. I know.
No doubt.
Josh Friend, who is the editor of American Woodturning magazine, has a collection. He's a guitar player. He has a collection, and he had been thinking about making a guitar So when he saw my article, I believe, I haven't seen it, but I believe he has made a guitar using this idea, but I haven't seen it.
That is amazing handiwork.
Thank you.